Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Ciphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Of course, you can also find us online, YouTube, or our Media Ciphers Kalamazoo podcast. We are now joined by former Harper Creek science teacher Jeremy Cronk. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, all things considered. I sitting on my porch, drinking some coffee and brushing up on some chemistry. So not a bad morning.
Okay, well, we're having you on the show today for a very specific reason, and I'm just going to tee off some of the context, and then we're going to kind of give the microphone over to you and let you speak about what's been going on. But Jeremy had a flag hanging up in their classroom that read, Science is real. Black lives matter. No human is illegal. Love is love. Women's rights are human rights. And kindness is everything. And it seems that the administration over at Harper Creek High School seemed to take some sort of umbrage with this. And we're going to be getting into the thick of it. But I think it's important as I'm introducing this story to point out that, we've heard about stories like this, not only over the country, but also here in Michigan. And this strikes pretty close again, right over in Battle Creek. So let's go ahead. I want to kind of start off by just asking you if you could just walk our listeners through the events of the last week, and when you found out Harper Creek wanted the sign removed from your classroom.
Yeah. So we started almost in mid-August. This happened after the first week of school. So we started on the 19th, and this is actually this a new school district for me. I'd taught there previously a couple years ago, but for the past 4 years, I've been teaching at Pawpaw High School. I had history with this district, and I had a positive experience there when I taught there for 2 years, like 6 years, 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, so it was new for me this school year, new position. I had a really great first week of school. I felt like probably the best teaching that I've ever done. This is my starting my 11th year of teaching, and the kids were enjoying what I was doing. They seemed to be receptive, seemed to be uh, just I don't know, meshing well with my teaching style, and really good first week. The Monday after the first week of school, my principal came to me and told me that there had been some concerns raised over the flag by, I think, a parent. I think a student probably saw it and told their parent about it. The parent reached out, and then some other staff members had seen it and were concerned about it. And so he basically told me that I needed to take it down, and I explained why I didn't feel like it was appropriate to bring it down and what my intent was with it, which is just to show that my room is a safe, inclusive space for everybody. And that was kind of it. I left it up. Although I did that day, I was kind of thrown off by that interaction, coming off of what I felt like was a really good week of teaching, and then having my boss come tell me that there were issues with what I was doing. I did make a post on social media, just kind of being weird and kind of goofy about it, like I am. But I was really just kind of trying to seek support from my buds and getting some, I don't know, reinforcement that I wasn't doing a bad thing by having it up in my room. Anyway, a couple days later, my union reps came to me and they basically told me that I had to take the flag down. Being new to the district, I'm not tenured, and it seemed like even with union representation, the district wanted me to have the flag down, and there wasn't really much that they could do besides that. So I told them again that I wasn't planning on bringing it down. Then we had Labor Day weekend, and then when I came back to school on Tuesday, the principal came back to me, asked me about the flag again. I told him that I wasn't planning on bringing it down, and he's like, "All right, well, we have a meeting after school with the superintendent." So finished that day of teaching, met with the superintendent, my principal, and then my union folks, and pretty much the conversation was just there was a specific section of the board policy that was making what I had on the wall problematic. And the main, I guess the root of it was they were saying that it was a partisan flag, and I was pushing partisan ideals in my classroom. Uh, I should include that I'd never even referenced the flag. I just had it up in the corner next to a Batman poster and by a guitar, just kind of just showing that this is my space and giving students a little bit of insight as to who I am as a person, and really just to show inclusion. But I asked them specifically what parts of the flag were partisan, and they pretty much focused on Black Lives Matter, women's rights are human rights, love is love, and no human is illegal. Uh, During that interaction, I kind of pushed back on that, and then I I guess I've like put it in. I've had this conversation with most people that I've talked to about it, but my administrator specifically referenced the women's rights are human rights as being like a comparable statement to the "Let's Go Brandon" thing, and that blew my mind. I just like I was sitting there and I couldn't believe it. I didn't in person. I didn't really react to it, but like on my drive home, I was just like, that is insane. I can't understand that comparison. But after hearing that, I was told that I had to let them know the next morning if I was going to take the flag down or not. And if I didn't bring the flag down, I was going to be put on administrative leave. And then if I continued to argue bringing the flag down, I was going to be terminated. So I just wrote up a resignation letter the next day. I called into work on Wednesday. I was just pretty stressed with the situation, but I went in on Thursday, resigned, grabbed my stuff, and left. And then I've been done. It's been a pretty hectic couple weeks.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of the show, thank you for kind of standing up to your principles. That's not an easy thing to do. And we're gonna dive in a little bit deeper into some of the context you just brought up. But I just want to know first, has anything like this ever come up before? We've of course we've heard stories across the states and the country in the last couple of years of teachers being targeted for either their signage or political allegiances and whatnot. But why do you think you mentioned this is a school you worked at before? And sorry. And you've also worked at Pawpaw, which it tends to lean a little bit demographically conservative. Why do you think the administration decided to tell you to take this flag down this school year in particular? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I was definitely like pretty caught off guard by it. Like you mentioned, I've worked at Pop previously, and being a conservative leaning area, I remember starting there and being kind of concerned about just how what I do would be perceived. And I was surprised by how kind everybody, at least that I interacted with in the student body that I worked with at Pawpaw, was. I had similar signage up in my classroom pretty much the entire time that I worked at Pawpaw, and I never really got any flack for it. There was one time frame in 2022 where district wide we were asked to take pride flags down, and I spoke at a board meeting about that along with a number of other teachers and some students and some parents, and the district ended up walking back on that, which was great. But my administrator through that was very supportive of me and knew me and knew the culture of my classroom, and just was, I don't know, they understood the intent and understood that it wasn't me trying to indoctrinate kids. So that coming to another school district that I knew would skew probably a little bit more conservatively, I guess I kind of had that in my mind, and I wasn't expecting to be kind of railroaded the way that I was for the flag. I know Harper Creek is they've had a kind of a couple years of weird things going on with the district. There's been three different teachers that have ended up having like allegations, and then in one case, like he's actually being tried for assault of minors, which is pretty crazy. And I'm not trying to speak on that excessively, but I feel like maybe they're just they were wanting to avoid controversy and trying to kind of like cut this off as quickly as possible. So maybe in order to snuff out any negativity or bad press, they kind of just hammered me and tried to cut it out right out of the gates. Um, and with that, I don't think that it was like a personal thing. I think it was just kind of like this is something that could blow up negatively for us. We got to cut it out regardless of who the person is. Um, and then it's an election year, and we have one incredibly polarizing person that has definitely kind of shifted our culture nationally over the past, I don't know, almost decade now. So I have to imagine that has something to do with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned like the way they wanted to avoid controversy, God forbid somebody called up Fox News about it. Um, but of course, we're seeing, WWMT recently cover this as well, and at least local press is giving it an eye. And I mean, they're kind of like framing it to for people to draw their own conclusions. But in a sense, I would say if that was the plan, it backfired in a certain way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
um, so talking a little bit about that kind of cultural schism, and I wanted to kind of just get your reflections as a science teacher and somebody who's lived has experienced America in the last 10 years. So on top of the sign, it reads, "Science is real." Now, there's been a lot of discussion about how right-wing groups have been attacking schools for having books on, race and gender, book bans, this idea of trying to get anything to do with LGBTQ materials out of school, etc. As a science teacher, can you talk about your experience on how your particular subject matter, um, if you've dealt with any sort of a politicization of it in your own career, or maybe your colleagues have, and how that has played out in your classroom over the last couple years leading into the situation at Harper Creek?
Yeah. It was actually the first conversation I had with my principal. He asked me what it meant by science is real. We didn't really talk about it super extensively, but I explained that my read of that is just the science is how we understand pretty much everything that we understand. It's a way of knowing things, and it's a way of progressing as humans. But in terms of just kind of like the broad existence in my classroom, I've always been concerned, especially in my early years, of teaching stuff or getting into content that is quote unquote controversial or things that tend to get politicized. Climate change is probably the biggest one that I hit. I teach mostly physical sciences, like chemistry, physics, and earth science and that type of stuff. So I don't touch on a lot of the stuff that might come up with like race, gender, and that type of stuff. But with those things, I've been blown away over the years by how receptive kids are to just the science and not wanting to politicize it, um, or wanting to make it something that's I don't know, taking ideas to push change, but more so just understanding the situation and using science as a tool for understanding it. Um, and that's I don't know, that's I think that's just a testament to how great kids are and how willing they are to understand and learn new things. And I think it's more the adults that tend to be the problem in these scenarios. Um, yeah, I don't know. I haven't in my class in particular. I haven't really run into a lot of issue, and I try to work in uh, equity and justice wherever I can, where it lends itself to the content. In chemistry, I try to involve the Flint water crisis where I can. It's good talking about corrosion and reactivity of different metals. Um, you can get into that conversation about what was actually happening to the pipes in Flint with the water, and then you can step back and think about the why. Why was this happening? Um, why is this different than maybe what would have happened in Grand Blanc, which is down the road in a predominantly white suburb of Flint? And so like I like to include those conversations. In just in physical science, talking about the behavior of matter, we talk about gases, and so I've brought up the pollution around graphic packaging downtown Kalamazoo and how because the North Side neighborhood is right there, um, people tend to have more respiratory issues in that area versus kind of Portage or somewhere where you're further away from that. Just to push those conversations and get students thinking about those things within a context that's relevant to what I'm teaching. But with that, I've never gotten any blowback, or I've never had parents complain about what's happening with that. I've never had students at least voice to me that they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the next question I want to ask kind of dives like a little bit deeper into, I think from an outside perspective, there's lot of this seems really just bizarre, through the looking glass, ridiculous. And one of the most interesting things about your story here, this isn't coming from the perspective of, you don't have an administrator that's calling you like a critical race theorist, or something like that. It's almost like this just very almost cartoonish example of like false neutrality bias. um and what I mean by that, you mentioned that they equated your sign with "Let's Go Brandon," which is basically a vulgar political dog whistle. They equated that with your sign, which literally lists, both objective facts and, as you said, like things that try to be welcoming to the student population. And even recently, folks will link to the article from WWMT, but the district, since this story broke, has essentially doubled down and is continuing to call it a partisan flag. So I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit more to, them, not only calling it a partisan flag, but like what you feel that says about our current political culture in the school system, that there's like this level of cautiousness, and just the very idea that they would equate, create this false equivalency to begin with.
I think it's just really sad, honestly, and it does a disservice to students. I love your mug, by the way. That is a fantastic mug. Sorry. Uh, it's just really disappointing to me at the end of the day. And I think if you're saying that a lot of these statements are partisan, then I think the idea is that the opposite statement would be the other viewpoint. And I feel like the opposing viewpoints to a lot of these statements are really dangerous and harmful. So I don't know. I just fundamentally disagree that it's partisan. Um, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that other than the fact that it just really bothers me, and I don't know. It showed me that I didn't want to be a part of that school district, which is hard because it's weird taking. Uh, I mentioned it earlier, but I had this really great week of teaching. Like I was like, man, I crushed it. I was doing a good job. I was teaching science the way that you're supposed to teach science. I was showing kids um, that science is cool, and they were just enjoying what I was doing, and then just getting like slammed with this, and told that I was pushing some negative stuff with my students through their lens. It just really frustrated me.
All right, and I have one last question for you, Jeremy, before we let you go. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us on the program. I wanted to ask, again, stuff like, as I mentioned a couple times during this interview, stuff like this is going on all over the place. Michigan, the United States more broadly. What would you say to another Michigan teacher who may end up in a situation similar to yours? And how do you think the Harper Creek school district should have acted appropriately? Or maybe what you would hope they would do moving forward. Again, it looks like from that press release they really are doubling down on their partisan message, but we also are seeing some pushback. So I guess, yeah, sketch out like your advice to any teacher who might be in a similar situation, and what good you hope may come from the situation.
Yeah, thank you. Um, I would say if you're a teacher in Michigan and you have the ability to do something, then you should. But again, not everybody has that ability. I'm lucky. Uh, it appears as though I have something else lined up for me. So I was able to come into the situation aggressively, I guess you could say. Whereas if I didn't know that I had something else lined up for a job, I might not have been able to because gotta eat and keep a roof over my head. So if you have the ability to do something, I feel like you should. An unfortunate, or I guess a small positive in the situation of there being so few educators currently, is we have the ability to move around if we need to or want to. There are openings in pretty much every area of the state if you need to change jobs or you want to change jobs. If there's a way where you can better your situation as a teacher, I think you should do it and you should feel comfortable doing it. I've done it a few times, um, and I've kind of thought, I've kind of felt a little bit weird about switching jobs. Like a lot of folks go to one spot and they stay there for a long time, but every time that I've switched jobs, it's been because I can do something better for myself or I can do something better for the students that I'm teaching in a different location. So if you have that ability and you're seeing something that you disagree with and you feel like is negatively impacting the kids, I think you should do something about it. Um, I I mentioned it earlier, but I don't know if it would have been different if I'd been at this district for longer and tenured. Maybe um, the union would have been able to do a little bit more to support me, or maybe things would have been a little bit different. But in my situation, this seemed like the best move for me. And I do feel that there's some folks that seeing this happen, it's pushed them a little bit more to be more vocal about their feelings about things that the district is doing. And I know that there are some really great educators and folks that work at Harper Creek High School specifically, as well as the middle school, and I'm sure throughout the district. But I know a few people at the high school and middle school that are advocates for all kids and provide a safe space for all kids. And I'm seeing them take action and push back against these ideas that the district is pushing. So that's really inspiring for me to see, and I really appreciate those people. Um, it's hard to say, honestly, how the district should have appropriately acted. I know that I feel like they went way overboard with how they addressed the situation and that they went from 0 to 100 kind of overnight about something that I think definitely warranted more conversation. Um, but it's, I guess, kind of the community and the school board. And at the end of the day, those are the folks that get to make the decisions about what happens in the school. So I hope that it results in something positive eventually, or it can push some sort of positive change for the district, um, at least.
All right, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking time on the program. Again, just as not only a host but as a friend of yours, I'm really proud of you for like sticking up for your principles. That's always nerve-wracking when especially when your job's on the line. So again, appreciate you doing that. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap things up?
I mean, thank you, Andy. You're a great dude. I love your program. I love you. Thank you for being a voice for positivity and good um on the local community. You're a great dude. I appreciate you.
Well, think that warms the cockles of my. I might have to cut that out. We can't have too much ego boosting on here. But all right. No, no, it's good. All right, Jeremy. You have yourself a great one, and
Thank you.
thanks again. Solidarity.
All right, absolutely, man. I'll see you soon.
Yep.